Greetings, family. Sister Shanice in the house. Welcome, welcome to our Wednesday Sister Shanice show. Coming to you live and direct with another fantastic, blacktastic African history presentation. We are at episode 17 now in our series. And my, hasn't the time just flown by? Certainly hope that you've been enjoying the series as much as I have been enjoying doing the research, and got some great information for you today. So looking forward to you coming through the door and joining me for another Wednesday evening live on the Sister Shanice show. So let me just grab that link so that I can send it out. And please do assist me to send out the link. So I'm just posting it to family members and friends via WhatsApp. And, that way they've got the direct link that they need in order to come straight through to this platform. So, wow, family, time has just been whizzing by so quickly. And I started the series in January and we are now in May. Oh my gosh. And yeah, it's going good. Let me know what your thoughts are. Really love to have your comments. So the title of today's episode is The First Gods Were African, From Khemet to Christianity, the Hidden Continuity. Because yes, as they say, there's nothing new under the sun. And that's certainly what I've been uncovering whilst I've been doing the presentations, the research for the presentations, because, it's so important that we know the origins really of, civilization itself, the systems, the structures that we take for granted today. Because hey, when you dig deep, you find that the origin of a lot of these systems that we take for granted, like the religious systems, educational institutional systems, the system of governance, etc., you can trace the origins back to Africa. We don't get the credit, do we? We just don't get the credit. Excuse me, got a little frog in my throat, but hopefully it will run along very soon. So family, while I'm waiting for our audience to come through the door, I just want to draw to your attention the fact that this first of Messiah month is August, because that's the month of Marcus Messiah Garvey. So during the month of August, we celebrate Marcus Messiah Garvey every single day. And during Messiah month, we have, on the 1st of Messiah, we have our Reparations March. And that march takes place in London. And we march from Pioneers Square, otherwise known as Windrush Square. And as Africans and as the African family in the UK, we all come together to march for our reparations. We've been doing that, I don't know how long for, but probably for about 15 years now or so. And these marches just grow year on year. And it's always such a wonderful event, because we have family members coming from north, east, south, and west. Sometimes we have family members even travel from abroad to come and join us on the Reparations March. Well, guess who's going to be traveling from abroad to join us for our Reparations March this coming the 1st of Messiah? None other than our very own beloved Dr. Umar Ifatunde Johnson. Yay! Dr. Umar Johnson's going to be joining us, family, for our Reparations Day March. We are absolutely delighted that he's going to be joining us. Please accept my apologies for that call coming through. In fact, let me just quit WhatsApp right now so I don't get any more disturbances there. So yes, family, Dr. Umar is going to be joining us, and it's awesome, absolutely awesome. He's going to be marching with us. He's going to be speaking with us live from the platform. And you know, he always goes in hard. So he's going to be coming to us raw, real, and direct. And he's going to be speaking to us as the African family, you know. And we need to have these conversations as a family, very serious conversations, because there's always so much that's going on in our world as Africans. And you know, we can't always all keep on top of everything, but there are some within our community who just specialize in making it their business to know everything that's going on. And Dr. Umar, I mean, almost daily, he's speaking on a wide range of topics that impact on us. And I love to hear this brother talk because he keeps it real. In not tech back, not chat, in talk it the way it needs to be spoken. And so enough respect and big up for our brother for agreeing to come and join us on our reparations march from Pioneer Square, otherwise known as Windrush Square, on the 1st of August, the 1st of Messiah, 2026. So come and join us. If you're in the UK, doesn't matter where you are in the UK, wherever you are in the UK, you just take a tube or train to Brixton. Get to King's Cross, get to Charing Cross, get to Euston, get to any one of the major London train line intersections. And from there, you get a tube to Brixton. Once you reach Brixton, it's a very short walking distance to Pioneer Square, otherwise known as Windrush Square, okay? There's normally thousands of us, and bring your whistles, bring your foghorns, bring your placards, demanding reparations. Our reparations is long overdue, long overdue. And I want to big up the African Reparations Day Council Committee, who are busily behind the scenes, making sure that we have a successful Black African Reparations Day event. And so rise up, everybody who's involved in bringing that really important day together. You know, I'm delighted to be part of that committee as well. And it's going to be such a wonderful day. There's going to be entertainment. We've got some great artists who we are approaching. Papa Wasi has already said that he's going to be performing on that day. There will be Brother Asher Senator. We'll have a sound system there. It's going to be epic. It's going to be carnival style. So put it in your diary, family. And please do come and join us for the Reparations March on the 1st of Messiah, and help us make our special guest, our keynote speaker, Dr. Umar Ifatunde Johnson, feel welcome to the UKKK, okay? We want you to help us to welcome our beloved brother to the UKKK. So, you know, we're very grateful that he's agreed to fly in, especially just for that day and just for that event, because, you know, he obviously stands in agreement with us about the importance of making the establishments aware that we demand our reparations. We know that we deserve reparations, and we expect reparations to be paid. And so that's what's going to be happening on Saturday, the 1st of Messiah. So please do put that date, that important date, in your diary. All righty. And let's see who we've got in the house at the moment. Yes, we've got Verna, the coach, in the house. Rise up, Sister V. Great to have you in the house. She says, greetings, family. I loved all the presentations. Thank you so much. She said, they have been so informative, and you make it very easy to listen to as well. Oh, she says, great job, sis. Thank you so much, sis. More love to you. Thank you for that. It's those very encouraging comments. I want to rise up. Brother Curtis is in the house as well, saying, hello, Queen. Peace and love. Peace and love, Black at you as well. Welcome to this thing here, keep dropping down. Which side is it? This side. Hold on, let me fix up myself, you know, put me there on camera. So we're supposed to look. All right. Rise up, Sister Karen. Great to have you in the house as well. She's saying, I think you're feeling absolutely blacktastic. Likewise. Enough love to you, Sister Queen, all the way from the United States of America. She says, I'm here, Sister Shanice. I've shared on Facebook. Thank you so much, Sister Queen. And for everyone else who's sharing the link, thank you so much appreciate love. But I've got a lot to get through today. So without further ado, first of all, please do give me a thumbs up when you come through the door. Yeah, there's hundreds of you who watch these videos, but I don't get hundreds of thumbs up. One. Just give me a thumbs up. It doesn't cost you. And also, drop me a message. Let me know what you think of the presentations. After it's finished, you just go back into YouTube and comment in the comment section. And if you leave a good comment, like, what Sister Verna's just said, maybe it will encourage and inspire others to actually watch the presentations, which is what we want. We want as many of us as possible to be aware of our history. And, I'm doing the research, I'm sharing it. You don't even have to buy it in a book right now, so just grab it. Talking about books, please do get a copy of one of my books. This is my most recent of my 6 books. This one is called Hidden in the Shadows of Ancient Britain, an erased African history restored. So if you put that title in Google, it will come up. Please do get a copy. In so doing, not only will you be acquiring a wealth of knowledge that I have researched and uncovered about our hidden history in Britain that goes back well over 40,000 years. Oh, knocked me for 6 when I found out about all of this hidden history of ours in Britain. Anyway, this goes back to our very ancient history in Britain. That's where I started from. It goes back to the Ice Age era. Who knew, who hadn't read my book, that as Africans, we had an Ice Age era in Britain? Yeah, we were here during the Paleolithic era, the Neolithic era, the Brass Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, Roman Age, all of the age them. Are we did there, before them did come. Before them reach, we was their family. Oh my days. Anyway, when I found out all of this from my research, I'm like, my people got to know. My people got to know about this. And so I took the time, a whole heap of time to write it up and put it in a book. Yeah. The time it got take you to read it is a fraction of the time where it take me to write it. So I beg you do get a copy of the book. Yeah. If you ain't got time to read it, how about getting a copy as a gift? Share the gift of knowledge with a loved one. One thing about knowledge, once you've acquired that knowledge, once you know, you can't unknow. Once you've learned, you've learned, and it's very difficult to unlearn what you've learned, okay? And then people can't come and tell you any foolishness. People in the extreme right wing in Britain can't turn around and say, yo, come out of my country, because we can turn around and say, oh, for country, we was here before you. We are the indigenous people of this land. Don't believe what you're missing. Legal, documented evidence. Hey, it's all their family. Okay, I've just had a flash to say internet unstable. Let's hope that it stabilizes very quickly. All right. So how are you all today? Certainly hope that you've all risen in power and risen in strength, and that, you joined me today to, get that sense of accomplishment from acquiring the knowledge of our history. Right, let's get the presentation underway, shall we? Because we've got a lot to actually get through today. As always, there's never enough time. to do all that, to bring to you all of the knowledge that I would love to. And so I do like to give family members time to come through the door, which reminds me, there was someone who said to me, I keep getting muddled up. It was Sister Afrijama. I'm like, how are you doing, sis? Where are you? I haven't seen you for a little while. She said, I keep getting the times of your show wrong. So let me just quickly send a message to Sister Afrijama so that she can join us today. I love when I've got my brothers and my sisters in the house, you know. I just love the interaction that you have with each other, and also, you know, the interaction that you have with me as well. So let me do it with this one. And for those of you who were asking about our beloved Dr. Clyde, I'm pleased to say that I spoke with him yesterday and he's making a good recovery. Yeah, he's doing so much better. Each day that goes by, he said he's feeling a lot better. So that is great news indeed. And he said if his health continues to improve the way it is going, then he will actually join us next Wednesday. So hold tight for that, family, because we may have the privilege of having our very own Dr. Clyde Winters join us next Wednesday, okay? So let's hope that his health does continue to improve day on day, and that, you know, he gets the energy and the strength that he needs in order to be able to pick up and carry on doing this really important work. So to all of you who have been sending him healing vibrations, thank you so much. He's certainly feeling the energy, and it's working. It's working because, yeah, he's so much better now than he was previously. And you know, obviously we're just so delighted about that. Okay, I don't have any sound today. I'm just preparing to get the presentation up, but you know, sometimes it does its own thing, so I have to do it a couple of times. I'll get to find out what I need to do one of these days, just so that it does it first time. But you know, hey, yeah, this looks like the one. Oops, hang on though. Is it on my presentation, or is it doing its own thing? Right. Let me go over to YouTube so that I can take a look and see what we've got on the screen. Just want to make sure that you're seeing what I want you to see, and that's a presentation and not something else. Imagine I'm going through and delivering a presentation and you're not even seeing what I'm delivering. And with that in mind, I'm also going to bring up the chat just to make sure that I can get the messages, just in case you're trying to alert me of something. Sister Carol says, I'm going to email him. I miss Dr. Winters. Yeah, great. Please do. If you have his email address, please do message him, you know, send him some really good uplifting vibes, and that will help with his recovery. Okay, where's our brother Kwame Aboche? He's normally in the house by now as well. Some of my regulars, where are you? Well, where am I gone? The Jamaica Junko, Sister Afrijamo, you know, Sister Betty, with who's got her new name now, Sister Adawa. Where are you all? Don't drop off. I'm still doing the work behind the scenes to bring you this knowledge. So please do join me. So today's episode is episode 17, and we're going to be focusing on the first gods. The first gods were indeed African. We're going to be looking at some of these gods from Khemet through to Christianity and identifying the hidden continuities. Some of you, like me, who were indoctrinated with the Christian faith, are probably going to fall off your chair when you get the knowledge of today's presentation and come to the realization that a lot of what we were taught, usually as children, by these missionaries and so-called Christian do-gooders, hey, was only a fraction of the truth. You're going to learn the origins of a lot of those Christian stories. So let's press on with our episode 17. And for those of you who have been joining me throughout from episode 1, thank you so, so much. And yeah, thank you, Sister Verna, who said that she's loved all the presentations. Much appreciated. So the first gods were African, from Khemet to Christianity, the hidden continuity. So before there was Christianity, family, before there was even the Byzantium, which we were talking about in previous presentations, before even Europe painted heaven in their own image, there was Khemet, there was Africa. Yes, family, and that's what we're going to be looking at in today's episode. We're going to confront one of the greatest hidden histories of all. Yes, today, in our episode today, we are going to be confronting one of the greatest hidden histories of all, the African origins of the world's religious symbolism, the African origin of the world's religion that we know today as Christianity. Because the concept of gods and goddesses, the idea of divine beings, the whole language of spirituality itself, it didn't just appear out of nowhere, as some pages in the Bible might have us believe, like, woof, the voice from God just wrote the whole Bible. No, the language of spirituality, the language of faith, did not appear out of nowhere. It was developed, it was refined, and it was expressed by our African ancestors. Yes, family, the whole concept of spirituality came from the minds of our African ancestors. And they developed the concept from their observations of nature, the cosmos, birth, death, resurrection, balance, and the unseen forces governing life. And then what later generations would call gods, the ancient Khemetians actually understood them as the Neteru, the divine principles and forces of nature expressed through sacred symbolism. And so our ancestors, they didn't worship faceless ideas either. We've been showing you the temples that they built. We've been talking about the ceremonies that they developed. They carved colossal monuments. We've brought you so many examples of these colossal monuments that they carved in their own image. Why? Because their gods actually looked like them. Across Africa and the ancient world, they raised giant monolithic sculptures, temples, sacred sanctuaries, all dedicated to their deities, long before many later religions actually emerged. So in this episode, we were going to be following the hidden thread concerning the mother and child motive, the Immaculate Conception story, the resurrection narratives, the shepherd and with his rod and staff. Otherwise, it's not coming on. There we go. The shepherd with his rod and staff, the Black Madonnas, Egyptian, Byzantine, and Christian iconography. Because once the connections are seen, family, the hidden history becomes impossible to ignore. Ancient symbolism decoded. More African history hidden in plain sight. So today's session, we begin, let me begin with a reminder of the status that African women actually had in our world in time gone by. The ancient world was created by us Africans, and this was obviously prior to our enslavement, because I have to say this because quite often when African history is taught from a Eurocentric perspective, they try to give the impression that there was very little to our history outside of those hundreds of years of our enslavement. They never ever envisaged during the years of our enslavement that one day we would be able to pick up the books and read them for ourselves, that we would be able to research and uncover what they had hidden or tried to bury of our history. So from the Venus era traditions of the Divine Mother and the earliest representations of African womanhood to the mother and child symbolism of Khemet, yes, you heard, the mother and child symbolism of Khemet, and the Black Madonnas of Byzantium and Europe, we uncover a continuous spiritual legacy in which we, as African women, were revered as creators, protectors, healers, and the embodiment of divine wisdom. Yeah. So this legacy actually reveals that in many ancient societies, the African woman was not viewed as secondary or marginal, but as central to the spiritual and cultural order of civilization itself. The African woman symbolized fertility, renewal, intuition, cosmic balance, and the sacred continuity of life. The ancient Venus figurines that I showed you in the last episode, that we'll see again in this episode. Here we go. As if by magic, the ancient Venus figurines, often associated with fertility and the generative power of womanhood, reflect humanity's early recognition of the feminine as the source through which life enters the world. And I want you to look at this Venus figurine family that's over 20,000 years old. Yeah, this is the figure, the figurine that early African societies recognized, worshipped, and revered. This is the figure of the African woman that was revered 20,000 years ago up to about 13,000 years ago. And that era, from my research, were the most peaceful and the most progressive of our existence, those early years when the woman was the center of society. So these ancient Venus figurines, as I said, were associated with fertility, with womanhood, and it just recognized the feminine source which gives life to the world, through which life comes into the world, human life comes into the world. And in Khemet, this sacred role actually evolved into the powerful image of Osset. So thousands of years later, the sacred role of the woman evolved into the powerful image that many of us are familiar with today, the image of Osset nursing Heru, the son that she conceived through Immaculate Conception. I'll come back to that. So as in the time of old, right through to Khemet, which is recent compared to, our ancient times, we have Osset representing motherhood, protection, kingship, and divine inheritance. And centuries later, we have echoing, with the image of Osset behind, we get the images of the Black Madonnas, which became traditions across Ethiopia, the Byzantine Empire, Europe. And, you know, this image was actually preserving the memory of the sacred African feminine within religious arts and devotion. So they used art, you know, prior to the art, remember, it was architecture, it was monolithic, megalithic structures. But then came the era of art. Yeah, so from the carvings and the monuments and the stone structures from 40,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, we will talk about Khemet, through to the appearance of similar kind of concepts, but in art form, in the form of the Black Madonnas. And of course, yes, there were Black Madonnas that were sculpted as well, and these tended to be put in sanctuaries, churches, and some cathedrals. And it was all about preserving the memory of the fact that the African feminine, the African female goddess was to be revered. And together, you know, when you look at all of these traditions, what it actually reveals is that there was that continuity of religious belief and reverence in the giver of life, the African woman, and that tradition, that profound religion continued for thousands of years, thousands of years, thousands of years. We talk about our enslavement that was a couple of hundred years ago and lasted a couple of hundred years as if it was the be all and end all. But it wasn't, because prior to that, we had a history that lasted for tens of thousands of years, possibly hundreds of thousands of years. The African woman was a living symbol of creation. She was a living symbol of spirituality, of authority, wisdom, and the sustainer of life itself. She was about giving life. She was the force behind civilization. That is the status that African women had prior to our enslavement. We need to get back there. So if we kind of flick back a few episodes, well, from the beginning, we will know, those of you who have been with me will know that we've been journeying across the globe. We've been globe-trotting, and we've been uncovering our history, and we've been highlighting some of the world's original Black deities as we have been globe-trotting. We've been to China, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, India, Mexico. Wow, we've been globe-trotting, and we have found, wherever we have been so far, the unmistakable image of Africans as deities. And, you know, most of them, as you can see, of those deities were women. There obviously became a time later in the journey of our history, or in the timeline of our history, when men took up that position that the women had held for tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years. But anyway, today we're going to be taking our journey from Egypt, where we were last strong, to Europe. And, you know, what we need to remember as we delve into researching our history is that it has been the practice of cultures to actually destroy all the emblems and records of other religious faith. When a new religious cult come in, what they tend to do is try and destroy the other religion or the other faith that was there, or they try to, you know, incorporate it into their new religion that they may be trying to impose on the people. So you had Cardinal Ximenes, who burned the old Arabic manuscripts in Spain about 1500, the year 1500. You had the Gauls that destroyed the annals of Rome. You had the Romans that destroyed the records of Carthage and Spain. You had the Brahmins that destroyed the literature of Hindustan. You had the Muslims that destroyed the books and the records from the Benares and Bactria of Syria. And you had Alexandria that they burned, that library which had collected from the time of Alexandria to the year 640 AD, over 700,000 volumes of learning. Yes, that library that was for the advancement of the people, that library that anyone was permitted to go and study, that library that allowed anyone to go in, copy the books, copy the manuscripts, and learn from it. And there was a collection of over 700,000 volumes was burnt to the ground. I'm sure we're all familiar with that story. And so, you know, tens of thousands of years of writing these manuscripts, of learning and studying and researching and scientific tests, etc., burnt. Wow. We know, however, that they did manage to save some of those books. So what we're often having to deal with when we are researching our history is we are left with searching among the fragments, just the fragments of our rich, rich history. And even from the fragments, family, we can find so, so much. So if we look now at the origins of the spiritual belief system, before religion was organized and spread across the world, you would have to go to Africa. And the reason you have to go to Africa is because it already developed systems of spirituality and symbolism there. And there was already the concept of sacred worship. How do we know this? We know this, for example, from the Venus of Willendorf, little statuettes that have been dated about 25,000 years old. And they found hundreds of these miniature statuettes, and that led them to realize that, you know, in the same way we used to revere the cross, and everybody would have a, you know, a little mini cross around their neck, you know, people had this little statuette of this divine early woman, goddess, who would have been the protector, who was the one that would bring divine knowledge and wisdom, the one that ruled with authority. You know, so we'd actually developed this spiritual belief system in African societies long before later civilizations emerged. Because as I said, these Venus figurines that were found in Europe go back 25,000 years ago. Yeah, and look at the cane row, look at the corn row on that African woman's head, and you know that this is the body and the figure of an African woman, and this is what's being depicted here. So early African societies, we can see, have actually already developed really complex concepts of divine beings, sacred forces, and cosmic order, because this Venus figurine represented a belief concept, and at the time was a deity that was represented in the image and the likeness of the people who created them. Yeah, the image and the likeness of the African woman. And we can see through sacred art, through the temple architecture, through the rituals and the ceremonial worship that formed part of their way of life, that they had already developed an organized spiritual lifestyle. So gods and goddesses were carved from stone. They were carved from wood and other precious metals as objects of reverence and devotion. We already know about the monumental temples and the sacred spaces that were constructed. And these were constructed as centers of worship and spiritual authority. Ancient African societies, they held sophisticated beliefs around immortality, around resurrection, and around the afterlife. And we see that in their art, especially in places like the walls and in the tombs of Khemet. Religious symbolism was deeply connected to nature, kinship, protection, fertility, and early life. And we have on my left, and I would like you, if you're familiar with this figure, this image, and if you have already done the research, to tell me what your findings are about this particular African woman. And I've put her there because this is a painting that's hundreds of years old. It's believed to be hundreds of years old. And she pretty much has the figure of a goddess, one of our early Venus goddesses, okay? So who was she? I've got two versions of who this goddess was. So this beautiful Mother Queen in red here is an artist's impression of an African woman who was obviously very highly venerated. And the name given to this picture in one of my findings was Julia Agrippian. Now, Julia Agrippian was a Roman empress who was born in Germany. And she was the great granddaughter of the Emperor Augustus. And she was the great niece and adoptive granddaughter of the Emperor Tiberius. She, if this is her, Julia Agrippian, is the sister of the Emperor Caligula, niece of the fourth wife of Emperor Claudius, and mother of Emperor Nero. She was born in what is now Cologne in Germany. Another speculation is that she was a Sibyl, and that the inscription on the scroll appears to contain the word Sibylla, or a variation of it. If this is the case, then it would identify her as Sibyl. And in ancient Greek and Roman tradition, because that's when this goes back to, Sibyls were women believed to deliver messages from the divine. They foretell the future. They could foretell future events, and they could speak, and they spoke sacred truths. So she would have been someone who would have been highly revered, either as a messenger from the divine, or as the mother of Emperor Nero. So, wow. More research needed. If you've done a research into this beautiful sister queen and you found out who she is, please do share some of that knowledge with me in the chat. And so, you know, there's so much that's significant about her image because it just reminds us of the powerful position that African women held right up to hundreds of years ago, just prior to our enslavement. And, you know, you can see she's not a servant. You can see that, you know, she obviously was a woman who was revered. She probably had some spiritual authority. She might have had a prophetic voice if she was a Sibyl. And she would have spoken with spiritual authority. We can see that she's richly dressed. She appears very dignified and composed. And she's the center of that piece of artwork. And, you know, we're in a time really when status matters. And when figures like this hold such high status, we all ought to know about them. They're quick to give us images of Africans on their knees begging for freedom. They don't want to give us the images of the Africans who fought for their freedom. They'll give us the image of a man on his knees with in a prayer position and chains around his hands, begging for freedom. They're the kind of images that they like to give us, and they do that because images matter. So I've put this image here as a reminder to us that throughout ancient and even medieval traditions, the African mother figure was not totally erased from the sacred narrative. It was still very much an important part of it. And so what we have here is a fragment of the status of the African woman. And she wasn't portrayed as marginal here at all. She was portrayed as the holder of divine knowledge, or the mother of an emperor. Here we have some more ancient findings from archaeological digs. And this is why African history is so important, because, you know, when we find out about this history, it makes us realize the origins and the foundations of a lot of today's belief systems and societies. You know, when you realize that this history goes back 20,000, 30,000, possibly 40,000 years, and leads us right back to Africa, even though Africa doesn't get the credit for its contribution to society and for laying the foundations of today's society, if our children have that knowledge, it would give them so much confidence in life. And so what we're seeing here is that in time gone by on all the continents, because remember, these Venus figurines, this one here, the Willendorf ones, was actually found in Austria. Yeah, so, you know, that tells us that 20,000 years ago, our African women were eating good and living good in Austria. And obviously, across all the other continents as well. And this was before the whitewash, before the whitewashing of what the supreme being actually looks like. We can see that originally Africans at one time worshipped the great black mama goddess. And that great black African mama goddess was an African woman. So before the whitewash, the African woman was revered as goddesses. African women were revered as goddesses, and we were literally put on a pedestal. This here is a pedestal. These figurines had like a pole coming out of it, some of them, like a pedestal. So when we have that saying about putting a woman on a pedestal, it goes back to our deities, the deities that were depicted as Black African women with the African women phenotype, yeah, being put on pedestals. But, you know, I'm not the only one that's talking about the fact that, you know, back in our history, a lot of our African women were the gods and goddesses. Let's hear from one of their very own historians, Godfrey Higgins, who said that there were no white idols nor representation of the white image in the ancient world. He said, and I quote, "We have found the black complexion or something relating to it whenever we have approached the origin of nations." So whenever they've approached the origins of any nation, they find the black complexion. Blackety black, black, black. Rise up, Dr. Clyde. Whenever, yeah, they have approached the origins of nations, they found the black complexion. The alma mater, the goddess Multi-Mamma Mia, the first idols were always black. The founders of the oracles, the mummons, you know, always black. Venus, Jupiter, Apollo, Bacchus, Hercules, Astaroth, Adonis, Horus, Apis, Osiris, and Amun. In short, all all the deities were black. Oh my gosh, they must have been saying. And they know this. Yeah. And this is a reminder to them that we were first. And in ancient times, we'd already developed the concept of gods and goddesses. And this could be found in whatever nation they were able to uncover the origins. So wherever they dig, when they do their archaeological digs, when they find a tomb, when they find, a sacred monumental place that we may have used for burial, for ceremonies and what have you, once they do the digging, they find that the complexion of the people who relate to that nation were black, were Africans. And if we look at religion and the civilization in the ancient world, and if we continue to look at the insights from Godfrey Higgins, then, we learn that religion has always reflected the culture, the values, and importantly, the identity of the people who practiced it. So through their gods, their sacred art and rituals, ancient civilizations left behind evidence for us about their beliefs and their origins. Godfrey Higgins made a striking observation, when he was tracing the roots of these early nations and religions, he must have just been shocked, because what was consistently coming up and what he was consistently finding was the blackness of the original people, the black gods, the black heroes, the black sacred figures, and I've just named you some of the deities that he said he found were originally depicted with black features. Let me just remind you of some of these sacred gods and goddesses that were depicted with black features. He said, Venus, Apollo, Osiris, and Horus as originally being depicted with black features. So when you look them up today, if you do a Google and you try and Google Venus and Apollo and Osiris, don't be surprised if what comes up are the whitewashed figures and the whitewashed images. But no, Higgins makes it clear, and he emphasizes this in his works, that the early depictions of the gods and goddesses had black features. And this was the norm. It wasn't the exception. It was the norm from very ancient times. And so, most of us are familiar with the gods of Egypt from maybe our research of Khemet, yeah? As we know, Khemet was the original name for that region prior to it being renamed Egypt. So when we do, a lot of us are very familiar with Khemet, and we're very familiar with the gods, the monuments and these structures. And yeah, some of us are looking at whitewashed versions of these ancient goddesses as well. But the work he specialized in the study, and he challenged all of the later narratives, particularly those from the 18th and 19th centuries, that tried to remove or downplay the African and Afro-Asian influences from the story of Western civilization. So what Higgins uncovered was that early religious thought, especially as seen through the gods of Egypt, or the gods of Kemet rather, the Phoenicians, and even Greece and Rome, was heavily shaped by black civilizations. Let me tell you that again. What Higgins uncovered from his specialist studies of antiquities was that through the gods of Kemet, Phoenicia, and even Greece and Rome, it was heavily shaped by black civilizations. In particular, Kemet stands out as a major spiritual and cultural center, with gods like Amun, where we get Amen from, Osiris and Horus, deeply revered and widely influential. Here they are: Osar, Oset, and Heru. And here we have Oset nursing baby Heru. And from the last episode, you know, the Greek names, because the Greeks renamed them, didn't they? And so his findings pretty much gained even more weight in light of the uncovering today of so many Black religious art from the past. I mean, I am coming across, and I'm sure you are coming across, so much more art, Black religious art from the past. And this is a powerful revelation of our history. You know, it's just exposing and showing us the fact that in the past, the religious icons were Black. The opening of the Russian historical vaults revealed many biblical icons from the 14th century, all depicting Black figures. Now, some historians are trying to claim that this unveiling was false, that it didn't happen, you know, but the art, wherever it comes from, speaks for itself. The depictions were not accidental. The depictions depicted the people who had created the belief system and who were practicing it at the time. And they were Black people. And so, you know, what this tells us for certain is that from the earliest times, at least up to the 14th century, all depictions of the biblical icons were Black. Yeah, Black to Black, Black. And these sacred works of art, hidden for centuries, that are now being uncovered today, actually offer us stunning visual proof that early Christian representations were depicted as Black. Biblical characters were depicted as Black, and their authenticity can't be ignored, because these are not just modern interpretations. These are preserved artifacts, and there are a limited number of them in circulation. It's estimated that there's only about 50,000 of these preserved artifacts actually remaining. And we know that back in the day, there would have been literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these sacred images and artifacts. And so the fact that we've got about 50,000 of them that still remaining today, you know, requires us to actually challenge the long-held Eurocentric portrayal of sacred history, because their portrayal today of sacred history has a totally different complexion, does it not? And do they give credit to these ancient icons and images of Mary and child and Jesus? At its peak, under Emperor Justinian, that was around about 555 AD, this powerful African religious concept actually spread across the Byzantine Empire, which roughly encompassed territory that now makes up all or part of over 30 modern countries across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. So at its peak, the African religious concept spread across empires, spread across continents, and it was the spiritual belief system across Europe, across North Africa, and the so-called Middle East, which is Northeast Africa. And the core regions and modern countries were countries like Italy, Greece, Turkey, Egypt, Spain, various other Balkan region countries like Albania, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Slovenia. We had the Eastern European and the Caucasus as well, parts of Ukraine, Crimea, Georgia, and Armenia. We had the Levant and the Middle East, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, and parts of Western Iraq. This religion was vast. North Africa, coastal areas of Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. We had the Mediterranean islands, Cyprus, Malta, and the Balearic Islands. And, you know, we can find images or statues of the Black Madonna in all of these countries and nations that I mentioned. But if we want to know where, you know, the Holy Trinity comes from, we have to go back to Khemet for an early representation of the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity being Asa, Oset, and Heru, Father, Mother, and Son. And we know this to be African because, you know, modern Europeans didn't actually exist in the Paleolithic era, which lasted between 45,000 and 13,000 years ago. You're going to see in a short while evidence of DNA research that shows that white people didn't appear in Europe until the late Mesolithic period, which was about 3,000 years ago. So what we know from this DNA research is that all across Europe, yeah, the people were African prior to 3,000 years ago. So prior to 3,000 years ago, if Europe was Black, the rest of the world was certainly Black as well, yeah? And as Africans, we had our deities, yeah? And remember, these deities of Asa, Aset, and Heru, they evolved as well. You know, this religious concept, you know, just didn't grow out of the blue. You know, it was built upon earlier African belief systems. And so we have the African deity Oset, who was morphed into Isis by the Greeks. And she was the wife and mother in the Trinity. We had the African deity Osar, who was morphed into Osiris by the Greeks and became the husband and father. And we had the African deity Heru, that was morphed into Horus by the Greeks. And in later years, Oset stroke Isis and Heru stroke Horus, under the Greeks, morphed into the Black Madonna and Child. And then after the whitewash, they morphed into Mary and Jesus. So there's been a lot of morphing going on. And, you know, up until today, we still find the Black Madonnas, and we still find the depictions of the Virgin Mary with the dark skin. And, you know, this is prevalent in hundreds of Catholic churches across Europe and Latin America. And so, you know, Oset and Heru have been on quite a journey, and they're still with us. They're still with us. It's just that they've morphed into Mary and Jesus, baby Jesus. The Black Madonnas are still with us, but they've been whitewashed into Mary. And baby Horus is still with us, but he's been morphed into baby Jesus. Our angels these are the wings of Ma'at, you know, Asian, Egyptian, or Khemetian, part of the Khemetian spiritual belief system. The wings being the protection, you know, the wings of Ma'at that protects the people, brings balance and order, morphed into the angels that we see in Christianity today. And yeah, you can still find some of the Black Madonnas in many of the Christian churches up and down Europe and beyond. And so if we take a look at this bit of archaeological news, the headline screams, most ancient Europeans had dark skin until 3,000 years ago. Study finds what they mean is that most Europeans were actually Africans up until about 3,000 years ago. So dark skin was widespread across the continent for a considerably longer period than previously believed, according to a DNA study that has completely changed our perception of the appearance of ancient Europeans. Now, those of us who have grown up in Britain and were educated in the UKKK, you know, we're probably familiar with some of these archaic skeletons that have had an artist impression of them being a white Asian skeleton, you know, being someone who lived in Britain 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, or longer. We've probably seen many of those those depictions of early ancient Britons. Well, if you've got a skeleton and you haven't done the DNA study, you can give that skeleton any kind of pigmentation, any shade of pigmentation, and they gave them their white shade of pigmentation. Only now to discover, now that we've got genetics as a technology for doing the DNA study and finding out the true complexion, only for the DNA now to be coming up as highly pigmented. And so they're saying, oh my gosh, it's changed our perception of what the appearance of ancient Europeans actually looked like. And they couldn't believe it. So they actually scraped the DNA off of 348 skeletons, 348 ancient human genomes. So they've got the skeleton remains of people who lived between 45,000 and 1,700 years ago. Wow. They have in their laboratories the skeleton remains. So they've dug up, just for this study, 348 ancient humans who were resting peacefully under the ground. And they've taken the DNA scrapings from these 348 skeletons, and they found, after examining them, that the results is that pale skin did not become prevalent until about 3,000 years ago. Wow, wow, wow. Can you imagine the shock that they must have been getting when they was doing that research? It's another black one. 45,000-year-old skeleton, it was black. 10,000-year-old skeleton, it was black. 7,000-year-old skeleton, still black. No white. They're searching for their whiteness. Skeleton, you know, 25,000 years old, black again, and another black, 348. And they didn't find what they consider to be traits of whiteness until about 3,000 years ago. And this was, they said, well into the Iron Age. And so even though some of the characteristics linked to lighter skin, like blue eyes, emerged about 14,000 years ago, what I can say to that family is that in parts of Africa, you know, we have Africans with blue eyes. So just because they find a skeleton that had blue eyes and black, it doesn't mean that this was the emergence of lighter skin. No, not at all. So what we've got there from this archaeological news report is documented genetic evidence that Europeans were black, stroke Africans, until at least 3,000 years ago. And that is why most of the biblical images, why most of the ancient artwork, why most of the ancient spiritual artifacts depict Africans, black people, because they reflected the image of the dominant population at the time. And that means that the followers of those religions were also mainly African. So, you know, when you look at discovery like this, and you can put that on a timeline, you can see that you're dealing with a period of time in history when the world was black. And these discoveries seriously call into question the long-held belief that as a people who migrated from Africa to Europe, suddenly their complexion became lighter and we became white when we came to Europe. No, this genetic study shows that we remained black. We came over as Black Africans and we remained in Europe as Black Africans. And there is artwork and enough evidence to show that the complexion of Blackness didn't disappear. Right up until the 15th century, we were still here in very large numbers. So we remained black as we did when we left Africa. And so this idea that blacks turn from black to white when they reach Europe, sorry to burst your bubble, but that is not the case. And that's what this research clearly shows as well. So what we know is that Africans were African, and as black as they were for tens of thousands of years while they inhabited Europe, while they were, the population of Europe. And this study also suggests, elsewhere in the study, it also suggests that Africans were in Europe long before even the emergence of Neanderthals. And that means even before there were any Caucasians to speak of. So researchers used forensic techniques to reconstruct physical characteristics and extracted DNA from bones and teeth to determine pigmentation traits. And they discovered that nearly all Europeans had dark skin during the Paleolithic era, which lasted between 45,000 and 13,000 years ago. Therefore, family, this makes it clear that the original people of Europe were the Africans, whom today are referred to as Black people. They don't teach us that in school. They don't teach us that in the schools at all. And it was only in the late Mesolithic period, that was only about 3,000 years ago, that the first cases of lighter skin started to emerge. Now, when they say lighter skin started to emerge in places like Northern Europe, they're talking about lighter skin and blue eyes. So that's still a bit suspect, okay? They're clinging on to something there, family. All right. Now, the finding of a 12,000-year-old Swedish hunter-gatherer with dark skin and blue eyes was noteworthy for them, because this is where they're thinking, okay, maybe these people, went from blue eyes to pale skin to white. There are Africans with green eyes, blue eyes, brown eyes, black eyes. Their thinking is maybe their eye color changed when they came to Europe because it needed to adapt to the environment. No, there are Africans with blue eyes who live in Africa. Our eyes don't need to change color to adapt to the environment. We have that phenotype in our DNA. So blue eyes is not unique to Europe at all. And then they did the study of the Otzi Iceman. And I'm sure, if you Google the Otzi Iceman, you're going to get some odd-looking European white man kind of come up. Well, this Otzi Iceman was dated 5,300 years old, and he had dark skin. They've put it like this: he had darker skin than modern Southern Europeans. They find it so hard to say he was black. He had dark skin, he was black. And it wasn't until the Bronze Age, 4,000, 3,000 years ago or so, that researchers started to find some statistically significant rise in lighter complexions. They said with multiple individuals from England, Hungary, Estonia, and the Czech Republic displaying a combination of light skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. So this is when they begin to, it seems, find themselves. So the article goes on to say the fact that the transition from the dark to light skin was neither linear nor uniform across Europe is among the study's most important findings. So, you know, this idea that there was this uniform change of Black people from Black to white, they didn't find that. There was no uniformity or linear kind of progression of that actually happening. So then they realize, they say it's possible that some Neanderthals had pale skin before modern humans ever arrived. So they are the modern humans. Now they brought in again their Neanderthal theory. They're like, we can't find ourselves among these people. We just keep coming up with Black people. We don't exist until about 3,000 years ago. And then, you know, we're very few in numbers. You know, the majority are still African. But we must have been around there saying, we must have been the Neanderthals, and it must have been the Neanderthals that had the pale skin. And by suggesting that, what they go on to say is that the pigmentation, the pale skin pigmentation evolved in a more complex way than they believed. So their theory is that the Neanderthals intermixed with the Africans to produce the lighter skin. And this is where they are with their theory. But what's clear to us from the works that the scientists have done is that Europe was an African continent up to about 3,000 years ago, and that the pale skin, the lighter skin, started coming into the region around that time and didn't develop as in large numbers until much, much later on. So yeah, Google the Otzi the Iceman. You'll still find that they're depicting him as a white Caucasian when the DNA scrapings have found that he had dark skin. Let's pop over to the chat, see who we've got in the house. Rise up, rise up. Sister Karen says, welcome all the, thank you for welcoming all the subscribers. Thank you so much, Sister Queen. Much appreciated, love. Yes, I welcome as well all our new subscribers. If you're watching and you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. I'm just, I don't know, a few off from hitting 15,000. They've kept me on 14,000 something for about 6 years from COVID, from the start chatbot, them something there. They stopped adding my subscribers. But if I get a lot of you subscribing, it will actually push it over that 15,000 mark. So please do subscribe if you haven't already done so. And please do, as Sister Kev says, Sister Karen says, share and spread the word. This is real Black research history. Rise up, Sister Queen. Much appreciate, love, your support. Let's go through. We've got Black Acres of the Gambia in the house. Woo, woo, woo. Rise up, rise up. Two of my favorite people in the Gambia are in the house. If you don't know our beautiful Sister Queen and King of the Black Acres of the Gambia, just go to their YouTube channel. They are amazing. Rise up, and says, Wellness Mahat teachings. Hello, I'm subscribed. Oh, Nandis, thank you so much for subscribing. Welcome, welcome. And Annie Ank is saying it's not so-called Venus, Asset. It's not Venus, Asset. Tons is in the house. Welcome, Tons. Great to have you here. And to all the new subscribers, again, welcome, welcome. Yes, Sister Karen, they want to make themselves assimilate to the conqueror's ways, want to make them assimilate to the conqueror's ways. And big up to the Black kings and queens who are holding it down. Armes in the house, rise up. God is man. The black man is God. Hey, were you not here at the beginning? Did you not see those black goddesses? Before the black man was God, the black goddesses were the gods. For tens of thousands of years. Rewind, watch the beginning. Rise up, Sister Afrijamo. Glad to have you in the house watching from Ghana. I was saying, oh, we've missed you. I put a shout out for you. So welcome. Brother Thomas says, Denise, what about the Sumerian gods? Why have you not mentioned them? I'm sure I have in previous episodes. Brother Thomas, maybe you missed those episodes. Karen says, where are they hiding these artifacts at? Yeah, they're hiding them in their vaults, in their museums, in the basements of their universities that only certain professors can have access to. Shanice, are these black angels and black demons? You see, some of our people have been so indoctrinated to believe that black is synonymous with devils and demons. No, there were black angels, and they weren't demons at all. Were they black demons? Did we have that concept? Someone answer Brother Thomas there for me, because I've found where individuals may have committed some acts which were not in good faith. But in terms of the concept of the devil and demons, in ancient times we had our saints slaying the dragon, and I think maybe in later years they used that concept, slaying the dragon, to slaying the devil. But no, I haven't found the devil yet in our ancient mythologies or religious belief systems. It was all about balance, mahat, revering the woman, being at one with nature, recognizing the similarity between nature and the woman who gives birth, who brings life into the world, etc., etc. Hey, CF, are you gone already? But good night, or you just picking up and saying good evening, good evening. I hope you're still with us. Rise up, Sister Carmen. Good to have you in the house. Rise up, rise up. And Karen says, yes, they are trying to make the Black African information unattainable to us. That's right. This is why we have to dig so deep, to find ourselves in history, because they do whatever they can to destroy and to hide it from us. And so here we are now, going into the era of the Black Madonna. As we know, the Black Madonna, or set, morphed into the Black Madonna, and the Black Madonna was all over the Byzantine Empire, all those countries that I mentioned before, and all over Europe, the Black Madonna was worshipped. So, and even until today, they've preserved the worshipping of the tradition of the worship tradition of the Black Madonna. And when you think about it, this is a tradition and a belief system that has lasted thousands and thousands of years. And the Black Madonna, you can see the images of Black Madonna in Khemet, Nubia, Ethiopia, right across the so-called Middle East into Europe as well. So vast, so vast. That's the vastness of the worship of the Black image in our ancient times. And so from Osset stroke Isis, nursing Heru, Horus, which is dated around 664 to 332 BCE, one of the most recognizable representations of maternity, a maternal divinity in ancient Kemet art. We have centuries later, thousands of years later, we have the Black Madonnas. The image here of this particular Black Madonna is the Madonna of Czestochowa, also known as Our Lady of Czestochowa. a famous icon from Poland. And scholars typically date this to be around the 14th century, around about 1382. So from thousands of years earlier, this concept of the mother goddess nursing the child that was immaculately conceived. We have the Black Madonna. And the timeline we can see stretches from ancient Egypt, from our Divine Mother, right through to the later Christian mother and child iconography. And so we can see the origins, we can see the birthplace of this sacred story, can we not? Let me know in the chat if you can see the origins of this mother and child, this Black Madonna story. Okay. And as I said a little while ago, not only does this Black Madonna and child story point back to Africa, but you can find it all across the early Byzantine Empire, right, all across those, from the continent of Africa to the continent of Europe. You've got the Black Mother as a symbol of divinity, as a symbol of motherhood, as a symbol of protection, kingship, and sacred continuity. And so centuries pass, the same spiritual framework reappears across the Mediterranean and into Europe. And here we have the enthroned mother, the sacred child, and the halo, and the reverence of the divine feminine presence. The names have changed. They call it Venus. Sister in the house is saying, not Venus. What is it if it's not Venus? Enlighten me, please, my sister. Oh, we've been joined by Sister Betty Hotep, Sister Adawa. Welcome, welcome. Oh, good, great. CF, glad to know you're still there. Good to know you're still there. Sister Afrojamo, big up yourself every time. More love, enough love to you, sis. We've missed you in the house. And today now we're missing Brother Kwame, who's normally in the house. I'll have to find out and make sure he's okay. So long before, we got the story of the Black Madonna and child that morphed into Mary and Jesus. We had the ancient Khemetian symbolism and image of the Divine Mother and the child, a symbol of motherhood. There we have it. So, and I suppose it's important to say as well that what we're looking at is not random coincidence, right? Because the stories are just so similar. So not only are the visual representations very similar, but, the historical progression of the sacred imagery moving through time, we can see that they've kept the essence of the original story. So in terms of the chronology, Egypt comes first. Obviously, Kemet, prior to Kemet as well, this would have come from in the heart of Africa, probably from down south, making its way up through Western and Central Africa to North Africa, because there's so much history as well buried in the heart of Africa that just doesn't get dug up to the extent that, archaeologists are digging up other parts of the world and uncovering our history. And so if we follow the timeline, then we have to be honest. We have to recognize that, as difficult as it is to recognize, the Christian iconography that we know today belongs to a much older version, a much older African version of spiritual archetypes. And the older version preceded the newer version by thousands of years. Okay, let's jump through and look at some of the other important iconographies from ancient Egypt. So what we're looking at here on one side is Ramesses II, and this was his catacomb, over 3,000 years old. He's doing the Osirian pose. All right, he's got his arms crossed in front of him. That's what they call the Assyrian form of pose. Some of us call it the Wakanda pose. And he's holding in his hand, the crook and the frow, otherwise known as the staff and the rod. Now, back then, 3,000 years ago, and we know, remember 3,000 years ago, white people just started appearing on the scene in Europe. Yeah, only just. They found, some black people with blue eyes. They were just on the scene. But this here, thousands of years ago, you've got Ramesses II with his rod and his staff, which is a depiction of authority, protection, and the ruler as a shepherd of the people. And now, just as we did with the iconography of the Divine Mother in the previous slide, we're going to jump forward or run along the timeline thousands of years, 2,000-3,000 years later, down the timeline to here, where we find the image of a white Jesus holding a staff, or what we may know as more commonly as the rod. And this image here is depicting the white Jesus Christ as the shepherd holding his staff, and he's described as the good shepherd. Look at that. Holding his rod or his staff, and he's described as the good shepherd. Same kind of posture of authority, same kind of symbolic language, same role. He's got the same role that this ancient Khemetian shepherd and ruler of his flock held thousands of years before. The king was the shepherd. The staff represented guidance and control. And then the people were the flock under his divine order. Later, we see a similar framework. It appears again, just rebranded in a different religious context. So we know now that the shepherd didn't suddenly appear. The idea of the shepherd with his rod and his staff already existed thousands of years before. And this is how history gets rewritten. And when they rewrite our history, this is why I say that our history is hidden to us in plain sight, because they don't always remove everything, because they're not that clever to replace something that they themselves have created. So what they do is they whitewash, they repackage, and, but they keep the symbols and they keep the story, they keep the imagery, but they just whitewash the imagery. And they whitewash the story so that we lose the knowledge of where the story is coming from. And they taboo the origins of where the story is coming from so that we don't go looking for it. And this is how we disconnect, we become disconnected with the origin, and how we end up embracing the repackaged version that they've given us. So our history is not lost. Our history here has been whitewashed, and the narrative changed slightly, but here it is, hidden in plain sight. The rod and staff in the Christian worldview, here we are. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. This is in the Psalms. Trust in the Lord as the shepherd, because this shepherd is your leader. He's armed, he's your defender, your shield, your buckler, your guardian, your guide, your comforter. He nicked all of those ideas and that concept from Ramesses II. And I'm sure Ramesses inherited that as well from earlier times. And so in the previous slide, we had Ramesses II, who ruled in the 13th century BCE. Yeah, that's around about 1279 to 1213 BCE, 3,000 years earlier. And here we are now, you know, with a similar depiction, but this time with a white Jesus who was placed in the 1st century, 4 BCE, as the good shepherd with the rod. This is a gap of roughly over 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 years after Ramesses. Here's another overlapping story. If we go back to ancient Khemet, we can find the story of the eternal birth and the resurrection in the afterlife. So what we have here in this figure is Pharaoh Meneptah, and we have the sky goddess Nut, or Nut. And Nut is depicted on the lid of this red granite sarcophagus. And as you can see, there's a very highly symbolic scene that's been carved out here. And this ancient Khemetian funeral belief is that this pharaoh, who was the son and successor of Ramesses II, here on the lid of this massive sarcophagus, is being received into the afterworld by the goddess Nut. And you can see his father, Ramesses II, in the background here, who's watching as his son, you know, is received into the afterworld. So the goddess Nut here, she's kind of kneeling and stretching out her arms over the pharaoh's head. And, you know, she's like the sky god, and she's the personification of the sky. And there he is being received, being resurrected and, you know, received into the sky. He's going to be resurrected, and he's been received by Nut. And basically it's a symbol, it symbolizes the rebirth. Nut was believed to swallow the sun each evening and give birth to it each morning. And by placing her image on the lid of the sarcophagus, it's believed that she is also symbolically protecting the deceased king and ensuring his eternal rebirth and resurrection in the afterlife. Just as the sun resurrects every morning, dies every night, resurrects every morning. I didn't do a separate presentation on the belief system that started with the rising of the sun and the going down of the sun, but that was a huge sun worship belief system that ran alongside this belief system as well for thousands and thousands of years. And one of the reasons why, you know, a lot of these stories about the rebirth, the resurrection, the afterlife, the symbolism of the sky being the heavens and where we go after we die, the reason why a lot of that is incorporated into the Khemetian religious stories is because at the time there was the earlier belief system of the sun worshippers, the ones they call the sun worshippers. And, you know, as we said earlier, when invaders and conquerors or new kings come in and they want to take over, they also have to be able to control the religious belief system. And so one of the ways to win over the congregation and the believers is to a new religious system is to incorporate their religious ideas into the new religious system. And the new religious system at the time was really about making the pharaohs the gods, rather than Neteru, nature, that you know, was worshipped at the time, the sun and all of the cosmos, the stars, and all of the elements of nature. And a lot of these stories, therefore, comes from watching nature. So here we have what symbolizes death, resurrection, rebirth, and the protection of the wings or the hands of Nut to receive the deceased into the heavenly realm to join his father. Wow. So bearing that in mind, what we see here is the similar story that's been morphed into the story of Jesus. So here we have on my left, the sky goddess Nut with her arms and hands stretched out to receive the deceased into heaven. And then here on my right, we have Jesus ascending into heaven with God's hands stretched out to receive him. You know, this is what Europeans still do today. You know, they plagiarize our stuff. You know, they don't tend to come, you know, like their music, for example, they don't tend to come with something really new. They just like plagiarize our stuff. They copy, they imitate, they put their own faces up there. But underneath it, once you scratch the surface, you find that the origins of it takes you back to Africa. So if you look at these images, you can see where the original story actually comes from, because this precedes all of this by well over 1,000 years, and possibly thousands of years. So in ancient Khemet, you had Neteru, who lies beneath the outstretched arms of Nut, the sky goddess, and she's receiving him into eternal life. A concept that ended up in the Bible and in the Christian concept, really, of being received into heaven, you know, which symbolizes the afterlife. After you die, you'll be received into heaven. We can see the origin is the Kemetic story here that has been adapted by the later Christian faith. And yeah, but this story that was later adapted by the Christian faith was already fully developed in ancient Kemet. It was a Khemetian theology. The soul rises just as the sun rises. The heavens open, the divine receives the soul of the deceased. And now we move forward over 1,000 years and we see Jesus ascending, arms extended, received into the heavens, same kind of structure, same visual language, same promises. And so there are some really uncomfortable truths here. And it was, you know, after doing my research and studying my history, that my eyes began to open. Because, you know, I was brought up in the church. I had to go to church when I was little, whether I wanted to or not. And later on in life, I found myself back in the church again. But you see, when I started studying my history, and I saw that this Christian belief system was a mere copy of earlier belief systems that went back to Africa, and the story of the afterlife, the story of the divine reception, the story of the ascension, all these religious belief systems were all there long before Christianity came into full swing, around about the 4th century AD. And so this has to be a reality check for a lot of us, especially those of us who are into or were into the Christian faith, because Christianity wasn't a completely new idea at all. It was a repackaged one. It was whitewashed, rebranded during our enslavement and given to us. And to think that the original ideology was ours anyway, but they've given us different icons to worship. And then we wonder why, you know, our prayers are not being answered, because at the beginning of this presentation, I was showing you that people worshipped gods in their own image, in their own likeness. I think we're the only people who are not worshipping today a God in our own image and our own likeness. And until we worship a God in our own image and our own likeness, we're not going to see the power in ourselves. We'll forever put the power in the image of the God image in our mind. But you put the image of your likeness in your mind when you worship, you will realize that the God power is within you. So this is one of the reasons why it's really, really important to study our history, because when you find out the truth, you'll realize that they didn't always erase everything at all. They keep the symbols, they keep the stories, they keep a lot of our history, but they just replace it with an image of themselves. They replace maybe the names, different complexion, may give it a little new spin. And over time, they make us forget the origin of the story, or the origin becomes invisible. So I'm leaving that with you to just ponder over and think over, really. Wow. They really did a big number on us there. The symbols are the same. The question is, why are we believing in this today when this precedes this by well over 1,000 years? And even prior to this, there was an earlier belief system similar to this one as well. Where do we go with this? So let's have a look at the Immaculate Conception Christian story. You know, we have here Osar. Here he is with his rod and his staff as well. He's the Lord of the divine black. He was the father of Heru. He was the husband of Orset, who's the sky goddess, and Geb, the earth deity. And, you know, they had their different, the Greeks knew them by different names. And in the mythology, before becoming the master of the afterlife, that's while he was alive, he was the ruler of Khemet. And his role, he had numerous roles, but, you know, he was particularly keen on teaching the population agriculture. And he gave them the laws. And, you know, he was about advancing civilization during his time. And the story goes that Osar's brother Set, go back. Osar's brother Set was extremely jealous of him because he was just doing it so well. And so his brother killed him. Not only did he kill him, the story goes that he cut up his body into pieces and scattered it around the kingdom. And after he killed him, his brother Seth became king with his sister Nephis as his wife. So they were the king and queen, but his brother killed him, and his other sister, who would have been her sister as well, became king and queen. But Nephis felt so sorry for Osset, because after Osset died, her sister never stopped weeping. She wept endlessly. She wept endlessly over the loss of her husband. And so her sister decided that she was going to help her find the pieces of her husband and put them all back together again. And Osset, who also had magical powers, was then able to breathe life into the pieces that she'd found. And the story is that she found all the pieces except his vital reproduction organs, that bit there. She wasn't able to find that. But nevertheless, she was able to breathe life into her husband's body that she had reassembled. And after breathing life into his body, she resurrected him and they became together again. And soon afterwards, she, Osset, magically conceived a child. This is where the story of the Immaculate Conception comes from. And this is where the story of Jesus and Mary, the Virgin Mary, giving birth, miraculously to Jesus actually comes from. It's a whitewashed version of the story of Osset, Peru, and Set, and of course, Osset as well. Osar, Osset, Peru. So now we know where the Christian origin story of the Virgin Mary and Jesus actually comes from. Wow, 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 family. Here's another one for you. And this is now the evolution of the image of Jesus and how his image actually evolved over three entirely separate historical entities. So from Khemet, where you had Asar, who morphed into Zeus, who was the god of the Greeks. Yeah, so from Khemet, the god Asar, we have the creation of Zeus. Zeus was the primordial god of the Greeks, and they worshipped Zeus during the Mycenaean era, which was about 1600 BCE or earlier. But anyway, he was the supreme ruler of the gods and the god of the sky in the ancient Greek mythology. So he had a similar role to Nut, who was in the Khemetian theology, the god of the sky. So this is the Greeks had a rehashed version of the Khemetian religious story, but they put their own images in there. And, you know, in the Greek mythology, he was residing atop the Mount Olympus. He was on the top of the mountain. He controlled the weather from there, and he was wielding, you know, thunderbolts, and he served as the guardian of law, order, and destiny. And, you know, even this description of Zeus, you know, as the wielder of the thunderbolt, who was serving as the guardian, we can see that concept was actually copied from earlier Yoruba, Igbo, and of course the Khemetian ancient theological gods stories as well. And there are so many examples in the Yoruba and Igbo creation stories and religious stories that are so similar. So for example, you've got Oya, who's that fierce Orisha of the wind. She controls the lightning and she can transform the weather. And she's an important figure in Yoruba mythology. She's a warrior goddess. She can bring sudden changes. She guides the death, unleashes devastating storms. You know, these similar stories in all parts of Africa. And in the last session, I touched on some of those various similar stories across Africa. And then Zeus morphed into Serapis. Serapis was a Greco-Egyptian god that was created in the 3rd century BCE. And he was a politically, it was a political move to try and unify the Greek and Egyptian subjects. So under the rule of Serapis, you had, you know, the ancient Khemetians, and you had the Greeks, and they were trying to unify all of their subjects. So they created a new god, which was a fusion between the Khemetian god and Zeus of the Greek god, and as a way to try and bring the people together. So here we have Serapis, and basically just a hybrid that kind of tried to synchronize the Pharaoh era and the Ptolemy era. And then from Serapis and Zeus, we then get the creation of this figure here, Jesus, that we know today. And they kind of kept the long hair, you know, they kept the, you know, that kind of look. So they've copied from Zeus and from Serapis the image the visual image of Jesus as well. So we can see the overlapping themes that spans thousands of years, at least probably to 5,000 years, not 5,000 years, spans about 5,000 years, possibly older. So in terms of the visual iconography, you know, it's important to know the origin. It's important to know, you know, where they get these depictions from. And it's important to know the full stories behind these theological themes as well. And so, although there were separate gods during their times, and this is our time here now, they were all offering salvation. They were all offering the promise of resurrection. They were all offering the promise of eternal life after death. And they all viewed their followers as their flock and themselves as their supreme, compassionate saviors. The iconography wasn't limited to the Byzantium Empire. Ethiopia also developed their own iconography as well. Because of time, I'm going to rush through, but as you can see, they've got their own depiction of the Black Madonna as well. And these are among some of the oldest Christian traditions. These Ethiopian religious artwork are among the oldest in the Christian religion. If you can see, they were black skin, their own Mary and Jesus type figurines. And we find the Black Madonna iconography all over Europe. We find it from Ethiopia, we find it in the Byzantine Empire, we find it in Egypt, you know, the same concept all over Europe. And it's estimated that there are between 400 to 500 Black Madonna statues and icons in Europe. Pressing on very quickly because of time, just a couple more slides. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the image of the Pope and his assistant kneeling and praying to the Black Madonna. Now you know why. Now you know why, you know? Okay, and here we have a very early Byzantine Christian iconography here, and you can see the saints, and you can see this, you know, the similarity today with the halos around the saints, with them holding the Bible. You know, these early Christian icons have basically morphed into the European whitewashed saints that they speak of today. But these were the characteristics of the early Christian saints across all the continents, including Europe. And at the same time that there would have been the Black Madonnas as well. And if you read up on the Black Madonnas, they might even say, oh no, just because they were dark skinned, it doesn't mean that they were Black African. It's just that the wood got dark over time. It's like, really? But if you look at the chronology, you know, from the Byzantine tradition, even before that, the Khemetian tradition, you can see the continuity of the sacred mother figures. You can see the veneration of Venus figurines. You can see the veneration of the woman. You can see the status that the woman had in religion and in the society. You can see the role of the woman in terms of the divine mother, the nurturer of the child, the protector, you know, the one who had wisdom. And this is a concept that went across the continents thousands of years earlier. Let me land on this one. And here we have a depiction of another Bible story. This is the nativity scene as well. And here is the nativity scene. And here you've got the archangel Michael, the black archangel Michael slaying the dragon. There's nothing new under the sun. If you look that up today, you'll probably find a white archangel. In fact, I'm just reminded that they've even created one where they've got their saint slaying an African who's on the floor. You remember there's a big controversy about that. So anyway, we've been looking at some of the biblical stories that we're very familiar with, and we've been looking, I've been tying it back to some of the original stories from out of Khemet. And there are just too many of these Black biblical icons that have been unveiled that we're finding that are surfacing on the internet from vaults, you know, original pictures, some are copies of earlier artwork, religious relics. All this ancient historical evidence shows that the origin of the Christian story is not new, and it has been repackaged and represented to us. And so we need to reevaluate our understanding of the past. We need to reevaluate as well especially where we place our race and our culture in the scheme of things. Because as you can see from the history, you know, we were the creators, we were the central role players in civilization, in the early civilized world. And that it was our ancestors that laid the foundation of these sacred narratives. And much like Higgins described very early on, you know, wherever they dug, they found that the early images of the gods were Black. And these figures represented our worldview, our spiritual worldview of our truths. And this is the truth of our history, a history that's been long obscured, a history that has been rebranded or erased. But we are rediscovering that history. We are uncovering the shrines, and we're shining light on these hidden stories. And I want to thank you all so much for staying with me throughout this evening. And I just want to remind us all that we have a wonderful history. Yes, it's a history that has been buried or rewritten, but it's our job and our responsibility to do the research now to uncover that history. And so let's rediscover our Black biblical icons from around Europe and around the world. The truth is undeniable. The Black presence was not only part of the ancient world, it was central to the ancient world. It was central to the religious belief system and our cultural way of life as well. And these revelations are just uncovering now some difficult truths that the mainstream are going to have to face up to at some point in time. And the issue for them is the extent to which they have been distorting the historical narratives, our history, and how they've plagiarized and tried to steal our history. But I'm here to remind us of that ancient history hidden in plain sight. Thank you so much, family, for tuning in. I always try and, you know, keep the presentations on time, but time always goes so quickly. CF says, will you be discussing the pre-dynastic Kemet connection? Something I could research, but no, it's not something I was planning to do anytime soon. I want to go on to more symbolisms that I've been finding out about. And Sister Karen says they morph the figures and skin coloration. Yes, indeed. Locked in, we've got Al-Kabelah locked in from Nevis and the Caribbean. I want to thank you all so much. Yes, Sister Adwa, even the representation of the sun disk over her head is a copy of Africa. Yes, indeed. Rise up, rise up. To each and every one of you that stayed with me throughout today's presentation, thank you so much. I know, you know, there were some uncomfortable truths in there, but the truth is the truth, you know, and at some point in time, we have to face up to the truth and the realization that these people have plagiarized our history, changed the narrative, changed the complexion of some of the star characters, giving it their own names, Peter, John, Paul, Matthew, and all the rest of it. Oh my days. And pulled a fast one over us. So, but let's do the research and let's reclaim our history and let's share the knowledge. Yeah, please share the presentation, share. Let's share the knowledge across our community. You can chop it up, use little bits for TikTok if you want. It's all good. And please, if you do, just refer them back to my YouTube channel for the full presentation. More love, more strength. Sister Shanice out of here. All being well, I'll be black next Wednesday.